The pattern forms before anyone names it. A person builds an image beyond their actual leverage, then keeps feeding it because it once worked. Early gains came from visible certainty, not from actual control, so the behavior repeats without review. The environment rewards confidence on the surface while withdrawing access beneath it. This creates a gap between appearance and reality that grows without obvious friction. The person senses the gap but treats it as temporary. They imagine they are buying time rather than spending it. The mechanism is simple. Public commitments, anchor, identity. Private doubt never outruns public posture once others have seen the posture. Reversal feels like a threat to standing, so the mind treats correction as betrayal of self. They double down on what was seen to work, because it costs less today than admitting the limit. Every public claim becomes a lock on future claims. They move from conviction to maintenance without noticing the shift. The pattern installs selective attention. Signals that confirm standing get attention and repetition. Signals that question standing get labeled as noise, envy, or delay. Neutral signals get recoded as positives to reduce friction with a story. This is not a plan. It is drift. Over time, the person trains on reactions that preserve face and ignore data that would reduce exposure. The training goes deep because it pays in the short term. The short term becomes the only term that feels real. The context supports this drift. Most people avoid direct conflict with someone who performs certainty. Groups outsource judgment to whatever looks solid. They assume a confident speaker knows something they do not. They wait for proof before acting, even when behavior is already conclusive. The person reads that waiting as respect. It is not respect. It is deferral. Defer arrives as space, which can feel like permission. The person fills the space with more performance. The initial misread is consistent. Silence is taken as consent. Polite phrasing is taken as support. Calendar invites are taken as alignment. A copied email is taken as endorsement. A nod in a meeting is taken as approval. The person compiles these small moments into a record of control. It feels earned because it was effortful. It is not control. It is tolerance. The difference remains invisible to the one who needs belief more than accuracy. The structure of commitment escalates itself. Every public stance creates a cost to adjust. The more they speak, the more they must protect the image of being right. They frame pushback as proof that they are guarding standards. They frame resistance as the price of leadership. They frame withholding as strategy. They rename loss as delay. The story stays coherent in their head because stories can be kept coherent when facts are filtered. The power sits elsewhere, but the presentation of power remains active. This mismatch grows while they keep delivering the same posture to a shrinking audience. The power they counted on is gone. The moral cover compounds the problem. They place themselves as the guardian of quality, of consistency, of principle. Under that frame, any adjustment looks like capitulation, and any softness looks like weakness. They stop asking what outcome matters and start asking what image must be held. They feel targeted when outcomes shift away from them. Because under their story, loss only arrives through sabotage. They call it politics to avoid calling it consequence. The label works enough to maintain their self-view. Sunk cost locks the system. The hours, the history, the favors, the recorded claims, all stack into a proof of entitlement. They think the past binds the future. Others do not share that belief. Others watch for current competence and current value. Others move away when energy consumption exceeds output. They will not explain this move. They will just step around the person and gather elsewhere. The person will keep telling the story to anyone who listens, which over time will be fewer people. The room begins to separate signs of position from signs of influence. Formalities remain because they are cheap to maintain. Signals of attention disappear because they are expensive to keep. The person holds titles, rooms, panels, symbols. The decisions exit through side channels and closed loops. If they look only at these symbols, they will believe nothing has changed. If they look at response times and invitation lists, they will see everything has changed. They do not look there. Their influence shrinks while they keep acting important. The sensory data is available. Fewer direct updates, more delays without explanation, increased use of passive language when their name comes up, less eye contact, more references to process. Invites sent to assistants rather than to them. Praise for past contributions, not engagement with new input. They explain each one away, because explaining allows continuity. Explanation preserves pride. Pride becomes the gate that filters truth. The narrative they hold grows defensive and pure. They tell themselves they are the only one who sees the risk. They position their resistance as a necessary friction. They speak about standards more than outcomes. They believe people will come back to them when current efforts fail. They hold to the idea that time is on their side. They talk about inevitability as if it favors them. It does not. They lose the room without seeing it. The pattern is stable because it protects identity. It punishes updates, because updates admit exposure. It confuses attention with agreement and ritual with commitment. It treats courtesy as credit. It treats appearances as assets that can be spent. The person is not choosing delusion as a tactic. They are trapped in a sequence of prior moves. There is no adjustment because adjustment would mean the self was wrong in public. The mind solves for self-consistency first. Everything else is downstream. From inside the pattern, it feels justified. It feels like standing firm against drift. It feels like holding the line for quality against a convenience culture. It feels like protecting the group from avoidable mistakes. It feels like patience. Each new signal is integrated as proof of the same story. Each absence is coded as temporary. Each favor is treated as a marker to be cashed in later. The person assumes the ledger will pay out because they believe it was written to favor them. When reality touches the story hardens. The person moves to escalate their display. They become more certain in tone, more absolute in claims, more public in stance. They add more witnesses to lock in coverage. They take small losses as personal slights and demand correction. They send longer messages. They request more meetings. They quote the past more often. They insist on procedure, thinking it is a lever for power, without noticing the procedure is now a box built around them. The machinery that formed the pattern keeps running on old energy. It does not need new input. It runs like a script once installed. The mind maintains it by deleting what does not fit. The group supports it by avoiding direct confrontation. The gap widens until outcome variance becomes predictable. The person treats this as a campaign to undermine them. It is not a campaign. It is gravity. They knew this was coming because they felt the strain and chose posture over change. Observers do not argue with the person. They adjust exposure and access. They stop bringing unfiltered information to them. They keep greetings and remove trust. They change what questions they ask in the person's presence. They keep compliments and move decisions elsewhere. They choose speed over ceremony. They choose certainty over drama. They choose clean execution over noisy signaling. The person is left with language and symbols. No one believes their title means authority now. Reinterpretation happens in stages. First, people stop presuming competence and start requiring proof. Then they stop requiring proof because they have replaced the function. The person's name moves from necessary to optional to best to avoid. The shift is quiet. It shows up in routings, not announcements. It shows up in who is in the room before the meeting. It shows up in who signs first and who learns last. It shows up in tone that is civil and distant. The reputation marker flips. What used to read as conviction now reads as inflexibility. What used to read as standards now reads as stall. What used to read as presence now reads as interruption. People update the label without telling the person. Favorable assumptions are withdrawn. Neutrality remains on the surface. Underneath, the person is considered a risk to throughput. Talking to them is a cost. Involving them is a cost. Waiting on them is a cost. Access closes quietly and does not reopen. Authority reallocates through informal channels. People begin to make side agreements. They choose different hubs for coordination. They report around the person, not to them. They answer questions with information that cannot be used to halt motion. They change the cadence of interaction until the person becomes irrelevant to timing. These are not attacks. They are the maintenance of flow. Flow wins because groups punish blockers without saying so. Those who once depended on the person shift their posture. They show respect in public and indifference in private. They keep gratitude in the past tense and avoid any new reliance. They use the person's image when it helps externally, and sidestep their input internally. This is not hypocrisy. This is separation. The person becomes a front when needed, and a bystander otherwise. Their presence is cosmetic. Their absence is productive. It becomes an open secret. The person experiences delay in responses without explanation. They notice that replies come from people with less discretion. They are asked for updates that go nowhere. They are given documents with decisions already embedded. They are invited to reviews after execution. They receive praise that has no specific reference to current outcomes. They are thanked for context and excluded from direction. Each of these signals is clear to everyone else. They are excluded from decisions that affect them. Outcomes become predictable. When they push, people nod and wait them out. When they demand, people point to policy that looks strict and is useless. When they escalate, chain of command responds with calm and no change. When they withdraw, things accelerate. When they offer to help, that help is framed as documentation, not direction. A quiet sorting happens. The person is placed in ceremonial roles, and the work passes to others. The person's communications are parsed for risk, not value. People take the minimum required from their messages. They avoid open disagreement and avoid real agreement. They choose phrases that close threads. They strip emotion from replies to avoid feeding drama. They choose shorter meetings, larger groups, and recorded calls with no sensitive details. Over time, the person talks more while learning less. This is viewed as upkeep, not engagement. Their name becomes a checkpoint, not a gateway. When it must be used, people do it with caution. They prep talking points to complete the interaction with minimal friction. They log the exchange because it may be needed later. They do not seek insight there because they expect none. They do not ask permission there because they do not need it. The person becomes a requirement without influence. The new centers of gravity do not announce themselves. They keep their own loops tight. They protect capacity by avoiding the person's orbit. Their results make the shift obvious. People route to them by habit. They get first look at information and first pass at plans. They become accountable for outcomes because they already own the motion. No one calls this out, because calling it out creates noise without gain. The public image drifts behind. External audiences may still see the person as central. Internals no longer do. The person's statements are treated like press releases. Polished, late, and irrelevant to the next step. Formal honors may still arrive, because they cost nothing. Real power refuses waste, and moves to where execution is clean. This division increases until only the shell remains. The person tries to reclaim presence through visibility. Te pos. Te pos. Moride. Convene more. They perform oversight rituals with no teeth. The response is polite fatigue. People stop engaging beyond what is necessary. They prepare defaults that can be invoked without debate. Every added layer the person tries to insert builds evidence that they are a drag on time. The label sticks. The future flows around that label. The silence is a verdict. No one will tell them straight because it invites drama. No one offers repair because repair is a tax. The social system optimizes away from conflict by optimizing away from the person. There is no confrontation because none is needed. The outcome is achieved with minimal force. The person still sees symbols. Others only count throughput. The numbers pick sides. If the person creates noise, they are indulged briefly. If they threaten to leave, the system tests the threat by doing nothing. If they demand respect, they receive ceremony. If they ask for authority, they receive scope that cannot move the core. If they insist on being central, the core shrinks away from them. If they accept a smaller lane, the lane becomes a parking space. The longer it continues, the harder it is to reverse. Memory sets. Stories about them harden into defaults. New people enter and inherit the map with the person already marked as a cosmetic figure. Old allies convert by inertia. No one invests in changing a label that costs nothing to keep. They do not look for the person's growth. They do not look for their change. They do not expect anything except more of the same. At scale, the person's presence becomes a stress test. If something requires speed, they are excluded. If something requires cover, they are included. If something requires clean execution, it goes elsewhere. Their calendar stays full. Their inbox stays busy. Their words keep coming. None of it bears weight. The shift is irreversible because everyone benefits from the new routes. They knew this was coming. The map is already redrawn.